Okay, we're good.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being on the call. We've got quite a lot of different things to talk about that are a little curveball, a little bit. First of all, as usual, the slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We shall persevere until we succeed. Augmandino modified. So Dad and I were talking about, the subjects that we think are relevant, and we always try and come up with something. And this one was John Maxwell and talking about people and so on. And it all starts with people. And I want to just take literally a minute or so to highlight a tragedy which is going on in Ukraine, where more than 1.5 million people, as of now, have abandoned their homes and have gone and have become refugees to Poland and Serbia and Montenegro and countries around there. I just wanted to tell you that this is something that I know it's remote and it's far away and we don't feel it, but in 1956, the Russians did exactly the same thing and they walked into Hungary. And I was 10 years old and my mom gave me a little tin can with a hole in it to go to all the neighbors on my bicycle and collect money for the Hungarian Refugee Fund. I was 10, I didn't even know what it was about. Well, fast forward to 1996, when I was exporting flowers, and I met a flower grower who was from Hungary, and his wife was Hungarian also, she was a doctor. And I said, oh, wow, Hungary, I remember 1956 and so on. And he said, well, what's your name? And I gave him my name, and he said, hold on. And he pulled out a sheet there, and my mom's name was on there. And he said, this was one of the people responsible for helping me escape from the Russians in 1956.
Oh my God.
I'm now in Rhodesia, thanks to a list of people, and my mom was on that. So again, in 1961, I was 14, and there was another war in the Congo, and my dad was in charge of the Congo evacuation of refugees. And that was refugees of every nationality you can think of. And they all came via Salisbury, which was where I was living. I was 14, and I remember we had 7 strangers living in our house, rotating for weeks and weeks. These were all refugees who had lost everything. I'm just trying to put it into perspective. When we talk about people, I just want you to realize how absolutely fortunate we are, how privileged we are to live in the States with all of these freedoms and everything we have that is available to us. Freedom is the biggest
I got it. Sorry.
asset we have. It's absolutely fantastic. So I just wanted to put it into perspective and for us to think about these poor guys in Ukraine who've lost or losing everything. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. So having said that, our business is all about people. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Tragic events going on over there. We talked about it a little bit on our Tuesday night call, but people really are the fabric of our lives, or the fabric of our business, the fabric of our personal lives. And so, we really need to focus on people, right? Because without people, we're not going to be able to get anything done. And, I'm really proud to be part of this company. And I'm sitting around, on a daily basis, I'm thinking about the things, why I'm proud to be part of this company. And yesterday, an email comes across from Ryan Napierski. And I was really touched by it. I don't know if any of you folks saw it, but, it's basically about the what's going on in the Ukraine, and that the New Skin Force for Good Foundation is making a cash donation to UNICEF USA to help support the humanitarian efforts, and asking for donations for the Force for Good Foundation. And, this is one of the first corporations that I've seen come out. I mean, I saw Apple and one other company, I think, come out with something. And so it made me feel really good that, New Skin Farmnex is really on the forefront with the social responsibility, we have the Force for Good Foundation, Nourish the Children, and things like that. So, it really makes me feel good that, the company as a whole really values people. And then, that rubs off on all of us, right? And that's probably why a lot of us are really enamored to be part of the Nu Skin Pharmanex family. And so if you haven't seen that, I posted it on Facebook this morning. Take a look at it. I think you'll be just as touched as I was. But when you start talking about, people, John Maxwell says that all of life's successes come from initiating relationships with the right people and then strengthening those relationships by using good people skills, right? And so we need to constantly be polishing our people skills and bringing the right people into our lives and into our group and into our business. Because when we all have the same mindset, the same values, the same ethics, morals, things like that, like people tend to, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction, and the like-minded people tend to come together in groups. And I love that quote because it really sums this up really nicely. And then, he goes on to say that our reputations depend on our unique approach to cultivating goodwill with the people in our lives. And I think we can kind of summarize that with what's going on over in the Ukraine. We have this tremendous leader in the Ukraine, who probably wasn't thought that highly of by President Putin, and thought he was just going to roll over the Ukraine. And here we see all these people coming together for the common good and fighting back and really showing their resolve and what they're made of. But they're being led by a tremendous leader that shows tremendous resolve and leadership skills. And so, I'm really fascinated by what's going on over there. And, difficult circumstances, leaders tend to rise to the top, right? And lead those people. And so we need to learn to be leaders of our groups, leaders of our business, and building strong relationships is crucial and needed for a business and leadership to succeed. I'm sorry.
So Dan, what you said about Nu Skin, first of all, it's about walking the talk. It's about integrity. We have that social responsibility that the company has. And again, we take it for granted and we just talk about it. Some of us actually do make some donations, and hopefully everybody does. But it's something that has a huge impact on a lot of people. So it's about walking the talk as far as Nu Skin is concerned. As far as the leader of Ukraine, he was a comedian and he was on Dancing with the Stars. And you look at that and you wouldn't give him 10 cents. And yet when there's a crisis, it brings out the strength in each one of us. And some of us rise to the strength, and some of us would collapse in that. Some of us would take the high road. So I think this is something, as Dan has just pointed out, that as leaders, we have the opportunity to shine. Even if we're not born leaders, as none of us are. We're all born wet, cold, and afraid. The same thing, and we just evolve into the people that we are. And leadership is something that, again, it's about people. It's about about being able to understand the people we talk with, and to have the empathy, to have the understanding of the people, to have the wherewithal to be able to communicate in an effective way. So, these examples that are going on in our life right now, in our lives, are quite impactful. And we can see it happening. Dancing with the Stars guy, comedian, and he's now one of the heroes of a war against Russia. Now, we're not getting into politics or anything, but we're just looking at the humanitarian side of this. And we look and see what it is that anybody does, and Nu Skin stepped up. That makes us proud too, makes us feel that it was one of the 100 most trustworthy companies in the US. That's what makes us feel proud as well. It makes me feel proud.
Yeah, it's, when you look at the leadership from that perspective of what Zelensky's doing over there, if he had just thrown up his arms and walked out of the country or been hiding in a bunker, people will probably done the same thing. But now you see the people, exhibiting those same values, that he's projecting, and the whole country's rising up. But so it's a very interesting thing that's going on over there right now. Very tragic. But let's get back to the John Maxwell and people. People being a large part of what we do in our lives, and he looks at some of these principles, or the book has maybe, I don't know, 40 principles or something. The book is called Winning with People, by the way. But he has about 40 or 50 principles in there, and one of the principles that fascinated me was the mirror principle. That the first person we need to examine is ourselves, and so we need to have some kind of accountability for who we are as a person, how we lead, how we focusing on all aspects of ourself. We have to look at the self-awareness, the self-image, self-honesty, self-improvement, self-responsibility, accountability, right? All of these different things. We have to look at with ourselves first if we want to be a true leader, and fix those things, or really cultivate those things that are good leadership qualities, and the bad leadership qualities we kind of leave on the side. So the first principle, as I mentioned, or the first one that I'd like to highlight, is the elevator principle. The mirror principle. So one of the things that they did was they looked at Pete Rose. He became so immersed in his job back in the late 70s, early 80s, that he neglected reflecting on his own life and actions, and he ended up getting thrown out of baseball because he was betting on baseball, even betting on his own team, right? And so we really need to look at ourselves in a mirror and say, is this the person that people are going to want to follow? Or am I the person that I really want to be? How do I improve myself so that I can be a better leader for others? And so I thought that was fascinating. That whole accountability aspect, we talk about that in the 4 disciplines. The third discipline is accountability, and looking at that, when we're trying to reach our goals, we really need to look back and be accountable as leaders, and whether we're helping people lead, and then look at what we're doing, and if we're doing the right things to reach our goal. So the same thing holds true when we're dealing with people. And I recommend that anybody read this book. I think there's a lot of really great information here.
So Dan, on what you're saying about focusing all aspects of self, including self-awareness, self-image, self-honesty, self-improvement, it goes to those 3 questions. Who are you? How well do you know yourself? Those are the first 3 questions. And what do you want? Those are the first 3 questions that I generally would like to ask everybody, because if we really know who we are and how well we know ourselves, we exude either positivity or negativity. It rubs off. If you're positive, it rubs off. If you smile at somebody, they'll smile. If you growl at somebody, they'll growl. And this is just a fact of nature. So yeah, people, it's all about people, and the mirror principle is right. In fact, I put a little thing the other day on a thing about the mirror. Make the mirror smile at you. In other words, smile at yourself, because you're going to smile on the world. So yeah, I think this is fundamental. It's the first part. It's one of the basic parts of it.
Yeah, the second principle is the elevator principle. We have the ability to either lift people up or drag people down. There's people that come into our lives, and it's up to you which way you're going to take people within your life and within your organization. And so there's a thing that he talks about in the book called the Compliment Club, which was an experiment created by a physician back in the 1920s. Psychologist George Crane at Northwestern University. He tasked the students with giving 3 compliments daily over a 30-day period to folks in their lives to help them learn the aspects of relationship building. And so the experiment showed these students how relationships can change quickly and positively when you deliver value first, right? And so Maxwell goes on to say that there are 4 types of people in your life or in your organization. People who add something to your life. Those people we tend to enjoy having them in our lives. There are people who subtract something from our lives, we tend to tolerate those people and not keep them close, just interacting with them when need be. And there's people who multiply something in your life. Those are the people that we tend to value. And then there's the people who divide something in your life. Those people are the people that we tend to avoid at all costs. So, what type of person are you? Are you the person that adds something to people's lives, subtracts something from people's lives, multiplies, or divides something? And if you want to be the kind of person that adds something to people's lives and you're not that now, it's very easy to do that just through complimenting people and adding something of value to their life. And so, the nature and the purpose of your relationships will also determine the time and energy needed to cultivate those relationships. One of our most important relationships, those that are going to last for a lifetime, require the most attention and care. So those are the ones that we tend to focus a lot of our time and energy on, because they're worthwhile, they're long lasting, and those relationships are the relationships that bring value and multiply something in your life, the first and the second type of people. So, we all want to attract the right types of people, not only into our lives, but into our business as well. And so we're really looking for those people that we enjoy spending time with, that add something to our life and are multiplying something in our life. And we really value those people and enjoy them.
I think, Dan, you just said something that I particularly like, and that is we value them. But do we make them aware that we value them? Because often we take things for granted. Excuse me, relationships and so on. So, people who multiply something in life, we value them, but we've got to make them aware that we value them. People that bring something to the party, tell them that they're adding something. And people who divide something in life, or people that are not positive, then it's also, if we care about them, we should make them aware of that, because they may not even be aware of it. Very often people are oblivious to a lot of things that they do, whether it's, not positive. And it can be up to us to have the courage, if we care about the people, to tell them in a nice way, but to tell them, look, I think you could improve this, or you could improve that. And also nourish the people that are bringing something positive, because it helps them feedback. It's always good to have feedback.
Absolutely. And then the third principle that I want to talk about just briefly is called the Confrontation Principle. So the mirror principle and the elevator principle are fairly, positive principles. And this one kind of delves into the negative side of interacting with people. And that's that, it doesn't matter who you have a relationship, whether it's a family, a team member, friends, those relationships will never be without confrontation. And so how you deal with that confrontation is going to define who you are and define your relationships. And so when you can achieve positive results from confrontation, just simply by going into them with a mindset of caring about the other person and trying to help them, right? Pointing out maybe what they might be doing, not because you're admonishing them for what they're doing, but because you really care about helping them understand why they're doing something wrong, or how they could be doing something better, right? And it's all about how you position it. Are you positioning it that they did something wrong, or are you positioning it that they could do something better, right? And the results that you're going to get out of confrontation are going to change based on how you approach that. So, one of the things that John Maxwell really urges us to do is to confront a person only if you really care about that person, right? There's no need to confront somebody just for the sake of confronting them. But if you're going into that confrontation with a mindset of caring about that person and trying to help them, then you're doing it from a place of caring about that person, rather than just trying to point out negativity, right? And so, we all have the ability to raise people up. We have the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror and really define who we are with the values that we have, and cultivate the type of person that we want to be so that others want to follow us. And we also have the ability to determine how we're going to confront people coming from a mindset of caring and caring confrontation versus just pointing out negativity.
Caring confrontation. I like that. That's actually fundamental. If you care about somebody and they're doing something that's obnoxious or negative or something, it takes courage to actually point it out because they get offended. But you're right, you've got to be able to phrase it in such a way. And I think that's what a real friend is for. In our group of people, in our teams, there are people that act in certain ways or do certain things. And I think it's up to us in a nice way to be able to discuss that with the person and say, listen, I'm just giving you some feedback. I think this is something that, we might be able to improve on, might be able to help a lot of people, but it's something that you're doing or you're saying or something like that that's not, conducive to very positive outcomes. And it takes strength to do that. And that's what leadership is about, to be able to not be afraid to say things and to take action, but in a nice way in our case as well, because you don't have to offend everybody.
Absolutely. So I encourage everybody to, think about how you're interacting with people. Think about the types of people that you want to have on your team. And we talk about this a lot. This is a business where we can really decide who we want to work with, and you don't always have that in the corporate world. You don't always have that ability. You're kind of stuck with the people that you're stuck with, who the company hires. And I had that happen to me multiple times in sales, where I had a very positive team, and the company hires somebody to put on our team and kind of asks for our input whether or not they should be hired or not. And a lot of times it doesn't even come down to whether they're the best person for the job. It comes down to needing a warm body at that time. Lots of times make a hiring decision based on the fact that they just need to fill a position. And we don't have to do that here. We have the ability. I've actually been on phone calls with people and got a really bad vibe from them, and I take the conversation away from the business, because I don't really want to talk about it anymore, because I just don't think that person's the right fit. And so, we really have the ability to work with the people that we want to, that have the same values that we have the same goals and mission. And, one of the things that I really love about what we're doing and what we do, how we do it, is that we have these healthcare forums. We have the next one coming up on March 19th. The one following that is May 12th to the 14th. And for me, those events are kind of a reset, an attitude reset, because you get to that event and there's, the quality of people there with the attitude that everybody has there, positive, upbeat attitude. It's hard not to fall into that same expression or that same mindset, because everybody is just, wonderful. And it's great, it's great that we have those from a business aspect of being able to build our business, but it's also great for me, at least, to get there and kind of have that reset of just being around a lot of positive people that have the same kind of mission, in life and in their business that we have. And for me, that's one of those things that I really love about the business.
Those visits, the fly-ins, used to be called Bill Belief, and you're right. It's because we all get imbued in a common enthusiasm of going forward with strength, and everybody else is on the same page, and that's actually where we flourish. So you're quite right. And there's the one on the 19th, which is 2 weeks time. I mean, it's 2.5 weeks time, so it's just down the corner. And actually, I'm really glad that Dan is coming to Florida. So we've managed to get him out of the snow and sleet and what have you from Pennsylvania. So the 19th. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add or subtract, or any comments or anything like that? We're just literally a couple of minute or two more.
Yeah, I do have something as a coach, and I coached 3 different sports in high school. One of the things I found was when you talk to somebody about making a correction, the first thing you start with is, I saw this is what you did. That's pretty good. I like what it is, but I think we can make it a little bit better by doing this. And so starting with the positive and not making them feel like they don't have any value in what they attempted.
That's a great comment. And I love when Chuck jumps on with with a comment, because there's never any doubt about what time it is and what university that he follows.
Well, that's where my money went for my daughter. So, it's
You set your daughter,
and the clock is never right. It keeps track.
you sent your daughter to Ohio State University, and all you got was that sweater.
I got this sweatshirt from him. Yeah, as a Christmas gift,
It was well worth the money.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Anybody else with comments, questions, concerns? All right. Well, we are going to wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining us. Keep in mind, if you have any spare change laying around, make that donation to the Force for Good, and let's see what we can't do to help others over there in Ukraine and around the world with the 2 foundations that we help represent through New Skin Farm. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody March 19th who's going to be there, and let's go out and see how many people we can get there. I know it's last minute, but there's still an opportunity to get some folks to attend that event, especially down in Florida. So, really focus on recruiting in the Florida area or the surrounding states to see if we can't get some additional folks there in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's fill the room, man. Got a lot of good stuff going on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for the inspirations.
Yep. Thank you. Very good. Great topic.
Thank you.